False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm John Bueller, staff writer, fansided.com. I'm joined today by a man we refer to as the Cajun Beast. Although he's not the king of New Orleans, he still thinks he's better than Ezra. Cody Williams, content director, gonna make $20 before the weekend's over. How are you?
I hope I make $20. I hope I make a little bit more than that, man. But no, I'm doing good. It's I'm excited for week two. I think it's a interesting slate. So it's got my attention. Week one, I think really just got the excitement levels up. Fighting through the pain of being just flat out exhausted after week one of the season. So that's not great.
Healthy helping of games this week, but man's got to eat. Yes, today we're doing something that we didn't think was possible, but only we could do this. We are going to be doing just like Novocaine for Better Than Ezra for today's games, and it's also going to be Trailer Park Boys themed because, why not? We haven't done a themed episode in a while, and looking for quotes to put in front of our segments is always a good time.
That's right. I mean, especially when it comes to Trailer Park Boys, where we have such a rich text to pull from.
Yes, there's like 12 seasons. The first seven are great, and then the last five get a little dark, but that's how it goes.
I mean, just tortured comedic geniuses. That's what we're looking at.
That's how it goes when you are the liquor, basically. You are the. I mean, we named one of our greatest awards after Jim Leahy for very important reasons. Rest in peace, John Dunsworth.
Dude, RIP in peace. That's a tough blow for the program. But yeah, we're in the slot, and that's all we can do.
As with anything Jim Leahy, we fall started. Our first and 15 is going to be I'm mowing the air rand with some You're doing great, sweetie. Florida State threw up all over itself again and may lose to Memphis next Saturday, too. My God. I know you were down on the Seminoles entering the season. You're like, there's no reason they should have been ranked in the top 10, but holy hell, man.
Yeah, I was down on the Seminoles. I wasn't this down on the Seminoles. Like, there's a difference between what I've seen and what I thought, and this is worse than I thought. Like, I thought this was an 8 or 9 win team. I thought that we were talking about them almost in the same vein that we talked about Michigan with. And I think Michigan is going to maintain some baseline level of competence. As of right now, I am not sure that Florida State is going to be able to do that. I think the two things that really stand out to me, first is obvious. It's DJU. Like, he he is not just the headache that we've seen throughout his college career to this point. I thought he did improve at Oregon State a little bit, but I think he improved because they just took the ball out of his hands, frankly. But he is worse than he was at Clemson. This is a worse version. He looks like he is mentally broken at this point, which is not a good place to be if you're a quarterback. I think that's fair to say. And it's tough to watch, but I'm not going to belabor the DJU point because it's been belabored by many others at this point. The thing that really stands out to me is how bad this defense looks. If you
Yeah.
have a mobile quarterback, it looks like you can just tear this defense to shreds because you look at the two losses they have against inferior, what should be inferior competition. It's Georgia Tech with Haynes King and Boston College with Thomas Castellanos, two of the better mobile quarterbacks in the ACC, and they torched them. And like both of them had big games on the ground because of that. We talked about Florida after week zero. We talked about Florida State potentially, needing that time for the transfer portal additions that they made on the defense to gel. I'm It's not that they're not gelling. I just wonder if you just didn't get the right guys. Like playing the transfer portal as heavily as Mike Norvell has is playing the lottery. You're not going to hit like you did last year for the perfect season. You have to use the transfer portal smartly because you want to still be okay if something doesn't hit. They're obviously in a position now where stuff's not hitting and they weren't in a position to survive it.
Look, it's not exactly the same, but we kind of saw this before it did really poorly with Mel Tucker. He hit with the
Mm.
transfer portal, getting a Kenneth Walker the third. And then it didn't work out. And apparently Peyton Thorne wasn't that bad because Hugh Freeze really trusts him. We'll talk about Auburn a little bit later in the show for sure. But I did write for fanside.com, five Seminoles who are most to blame for the 0-2 start. It's multifaceted. The only player I had on there was DJ Uyunglele. And again, like these are kids.
Mhm.
This is year five for him. He's a five-star. This is his third Power Five program he's been at. Like you should be better. Maybe he's an actor as opposed to a quarterback. Maybe if he's the Scott Satterfield of quarterbacks, if you will. But I don't think AD Michael Alford helped at all. I think he really set a really bad tone for the season for them with trying to get out. Mike Norvell did not hit necessarily in the portal. You
Hmm.
mentioned Adam Fuller's defense. His side of the ball needed to be good because the single biggest reason why Florida State absolutely sucks right now is because Alex Atkins isn't coaching. Nobody
Yeah.
remembers that. He's dealing with the 3 game suspension for recruiting violations, trying to steal Amarius Mims from Georgia in the portal. So he's going to be out for Memphis next week. Florida State doesn't play this week, and he's in year 1 of year 2 of a show cause. So yes, he'll be back next year. Florida State will probably be better, but like you're looking at a team that might go 6-6.
Yeah, I mean, they're legitimately in a bowl fight now. Like this is a fight for bowl eligibility. You don't start 0-2 and like I believe ESPN showed the graphic before the game, before they even lost, that if they were to lose to Boston College, they had a 1% chance of making the playoff. And you look at like these, I think the thing that is even getting lost in a lot of these conversations is Florida State isn't just 0-2. They're 0-2 in the ACC as well. Like
Right.
you didn't just lose, you lost 2 conference games, which is, I mean, just a hugely detrimental way to do it. Shouts to a contributor for Fansided.com, Austin Bundy, who came up with the headline, Florida State is 0-2 and out of the playoff, and it's only week one. Like just 2 losses in week one. That's a tough scene for you.
Yeah, that's absolutely perfect. I saw that headline and rolled on the floor and laughed my ass off a little bit. But also, these are against 2 teams you would probably potentially beat. You still got to play your 2 biggest rivals in conference play in Miami and Clemson, who we know that Miami's good, although maybe not as much as we think they are because Florida's awful. And
Hmm.
Clemson's a lot better than what they were versus Georgia. Again, I kind of have Florida State coming up dead in both of those games now. I just, from what I've seen, like unless Alex Atkins can come in and make like a huge change offensively, and they've got some sort of come to Jesus moment maybe during the bye here, that may be a challenge. But yeah, Florida State is just in a really bad spot, and man, I'm like legitimately shocked that it's fallen down this much this quickly.
No, absolutely. But the one thing I will say is I don't think this is long term. Mike
Yeah,
Norvell has been proved the recruiting at Florida State since he's gotten there. Like I think he was, if you look at the 24/7 sports rankings for recruiting classes, when like the first few years he was in the 20s. Last year, I believe he was either 11th or 12th. I can't quite remember. And I believe they're flirting with the top 10 right now. So like he has improved recruiting, which is what you have to do to get out of this mess, is to have those, 4 and 5 star players who are ready to replace guys or ready to come in or ready to step in a pinch, and you don't have, like, you're using the transfer portal to supplement your roster, not build your entire roster. He's just not there yet. I think people forget, because of the success that Mike Norvell was able to have relatively quickly in his tenure in Tallahassee, what a horrible situation he inherited. Like it
yeah.
wasn't just that, like, Jimbo Fisher left Willie Taggart a mess, and then Willie Taggart made it worse. Like it was like Jimbo Fisher left Taggart a house that had a house party that no one cleaned up after, and then Willie Taggart just walked in there and took a dump. Like that's just kind of that's kind of what Mike Norvell was left to clean up.
You know that meme of the dog sitting there, this is fine as the house catches on fire? That's Odell Haggins, dude, just sitting there.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're absolutely right, man. Like everybody of note on FSU that was really good last year was a transfer. Jordan Travis initially played at Louisville. Jared Verse initially played it for the Albany Great Danes.
Yes, sir.
Trey Benson at Oregon. Keon Coleman at Michigan State. I'm sure I'm blanking on somebody else too, but those are like the biggest names that helped make that team go 13-0, win the ACC, and cry about it making the playoff.
Yeah, Johnny Wilson was about the only homegrown
Yeah,
like skill position
right.
guy that they really had to work with. And like it does, and I do think the other thing that also brought to light is, out of those guys, outside of Keon Coleman, who obviously was a big deal for them, but like most of those weren't 1 year transfers either. They were
Right.
guys who had been with Florida State for a little bit and gotten ingrained in the program, particularly Jordan Travis, who was obviously the
Yes.
leader of that group. But it wasn't a band-aid transfer like DJU was supposed to be. It was someone who just needed a change of scenery and allowed themselves to build within the program. So like, again, I think Florida State is a big lesson in the transfer portal. I think that's really where I come down on it. And you look at this is a point I believe Andy Staples made about this, but you look at what Ole Miss is this year, and it's
Right.
kind of the version of what Florida State was last year, because you have Jackson Dart, who's now, I believe, in his his third year in the program, I believe, at Ole Miss.
Yeah, he played that 1 year at USC. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
he's certainly draft eligible. This may be his last year of eligibility, but he looks great. Maybe he's a serious Heisman contender. Like maybe more
No,
so than we thought.
no, absolutely. But I mean, you have him who's allowed himself to get like ingrained with Lane Kiffin in the Ole Miss program, and a bunch of other guys, on the offensive line and at wide receiver. And Bentley's been there; he's at his second year there now. So like guys who are ingrained in the program, and so they went and got guys like Walter Nolan, they went and got guys like Juice Wells to supplement that, and that's what Florida State did with guys like Keon Coleman. So I do think that, you know, that formula that Florida State used last year is not like it's not something that can't be replicated. It absolutely can, and it should be if you want to like make a jump to be a contender. Make a year investment and go get these guys that are going to make you a title contender, particularly in the 12-team playoff. But what you can't do is the year after that not have anyone ready to come up and replace them. It still might be a down year in comparison as these recruits or former high school talent that you recruited start to build up, but it doesn't have to be the drop off that we're seeing right now for Florida State.
Definitely. I was thinking about this, like, Lane Kiffin, he's not the king of New Orleans. He is the king of the portal, though. And what he's been able to do, it's been better than what Mel Tucker did when he hit. It's been better, clearly, than what Mike Norvell. Like, Kirby Smart's been really good as well. Yeah, Bosco definitely got out of move the baby gate. He's doing something on the table right now.
Oh God.
Yeah, but that's okay. There's nothing in there. There's no more dog food left. He got that when I was on the show with Blogger podcast with Tommy Jack guy. Hey Bubba, you want to come in here?
Give him the good pets. Give him the good pets.
I know multiple Kongs just isn't enough apparently, but here he is. Okay, he's got his little his ball. He's good. Okay,
Oh yeah,
but yeah,
give him a ball. They're happy.
I know, just waiting for an Amazon driver to come by, but at least with Zoom, we can kind of pull out the background noise there. Anyway, I guess like the last that we have got for this topic, we're probably thinking the same thing. Memphis might actually have a real shot to upset FSU in week 3. I think it is in Tallahassee, but again, they put this game on the schedule because that's Mike Norvell's former school. And we
Right.
think very highly of the Tigers. It's been a really strong program, under Ryan Silverfield now, under Mike Norvell before that, and then under Justin Fuente before that. So
Mhm.
Memphis has been playoff or New Year's Six viable throughout the entire playoff era. So I'm not saying they're going to do it, but like, God, what happens if Memphis got that win? That would be huge for them and their chances of making it into the playoff as the Group 5 winner.
No, it's absolutely live, and particularly if we don't see changes from Florida State and from Mike Norvell. Like, I'm not. I mean, personally, I would be putting in Brock Glenn over DJU at this point. Like, I think you
Mhm.
have to do that because Brock. We talked. As everything I just said was about homegrown high school talent. Brock Glenn is that. He's a four-star recruit that you got into the building. I believe top 500 nationally in terms of recruiting rankings. So like he is a very good quarterback who you can develop into something that is the future of your program. It's time for him to get that ball. Even if it's not switching from DJU, you have to dramatically change what you're doing on the offense. You cannot ask DJU to be the pass heavy portion of this offense. They barely ran the ball against Boston College. It was all DJU throwing the ball, and we saw how well it worked. It didn't at all. So, like, you have to change something pretty dramatically. And on the defensive side of the ball, I don't know what has to change, but something I'm not the best X's and O's mind in the world, but like the linebackers look slow. The defensive line is getting pushed back. You have like, I don't know how you instill toughness in these guys, but you have to do something to help that.
I'm saying, this isn't Adam Fuller's first year as the DC. He's been there throughout the duration. You knew Alex Atkins was going to be suspended. And it's not like Mike Norvell is helpless. Like he's a wide receivers coach. Maybe he's more Urban Meyer and Davis Swinney, where it's just like he's not a play caller, he's more of a CEO type. And that's
Yeah.
fine. But like you knew this was going to happen. You knew you had 3 tough games right out of the gate, and he didn't do anything up. He's got some paper towels, so we'll clean that up later.
Hey, again, on the screen on the scale of things he could have, that's not too bad.
I know he ate plastic yesterday. It's fine. It's like he knows I'm on the show. And he's like, I'm going to misbehave. Dogs can only be good for so long. And then like day 3 or 4 or 5, like, I don't care about you, brother.
The novelty has worn off. We're done here.
But that's the way she goes, Bubs. We're gonna do some do Host with our next category. Staying in the Sunshine State, maybe the Ain't No Sunshine Showdown. My God, Billy Napier, dude. It's not going well for the Gators. We're gonna do some do Host or do Host here. I knew that was gonna break you. You had it on the rundown. You're like, I'm not ready for this.
Oh God, I was somewhat prepared for the way she goes, Bubs, but I was not prepared for the Ain't No Sunshine Showdown. I just really wasn't.
No, but we're gonna do some do Host or do Host with is Billy Napier gonna make it through the entire season at Florida?
No, he doesn't get to play. He doesn't get to coach the Ain't No Sunshine Bowl. There's no way. Like there's no. I will say the one thing that Billy Napier has going for him that could potentially save his job, and it's what we said going into the season. DJ Lagway is going to start this week. Graham Mertz is in concussion protocol, and if DJ Lagway comes in and provides some sort of spark, then that could change things. Do I think it's going to? No. That Florida team looked poorly coached. That Florida team looked poorly prepared. That Florida team looked talentless on the defensive side of the ball, quite frankly. You know, it showed that they lost their two top pass rushers in the transfer portal and then didn't do anything to go replace them. It absolutely showed because Cam Ward had all day to do whatever he wanted to do. So, like, I don't think I really don't think DJ Lagway is going to save the job, but that is the one best chance that he has. But no, I don't think Billy Napier makes it this season. It seems like everyone is at a realization that they were kind of delaying, but they arrived at it quicker this season than I think even I expected, even though I thought he was a dead man walking coming into the year.
Totally agree. I gotta pause right now. He's being awful. After coming out of my cage, I guess I'm doing just fine, but I got to be down just like Billy Napier. Yeah, I got to go two Host, one S2. Yeah, I don't think he survives the season. If they go 2-10, there's no chance. It doesn't matter who the interim is. This thing's becoming incredibly toxic here in Gainesville. I think just getting smoked that badly in a game you thought you could be competitive in versus Miami is a referendum. And Florida's going to make, I don't know how they go about it for like the right head coach. In my opinion, they have to go for a power four head coach with years of experience, preferably somebody who's been in the SEC before.
Hmm.
I've said, the likes of Gus Malzahn, Eli Drinkwitz, or Lane Kiffin would be people worth pursuing. And I know we mentioned Jed Fish as well. That may be good to kind of curry favor, be one of their own. He was a student assistant under Steve Spurrier, roommates with Howie Roseman and everything. Yes, dog podcast right now. We got two hands on the dogs. That's how many wins Florida's going to have this year. My gosh, they suck.
They do suck, man. And it's yeah, I think hey, thanks. Oh, this is a dog podcast, baby.
Yeah,
We're thriving today.
I
But no,
know.
it's Billy Napier. I think that like you said, you have to get someone with SEC experience. I know we wrote something on the site yesterday that Urban Meyer is not the guy.
Oh no.
That is absolutely the worst thing that could possibly happen to this team. And in the like Andy, I believe it was Andy Staples as well, did a really good job of breaking down why that's not going to work. Basically, it's Urban Meyer coached in a different era, and he's one of the guys who is probably most affected by that. I understand he's an attractive name, especially because of all the success he's had at every stop he's ever been at in college football. But that was in a different time where you could coach guys a different way. And I believe the scenario that Andy painted out was, you know, in a past time, Urban Meyer would have looked at someone who was underperforming at practice or something like that, and been like, "I'll buy your bus ticket. I'll get you the hell out of here." Yada yada yada. Nowadays that kid's gonna buy his own bus ticket and go to Tuscaloosa, go to Athens, go to wherever he wants to go because the transfer portal has done that. And so that Urban Meyer style of coaching, which is a CEO type in itself, a mean CEO type, but a CEO type nonetheless, it's not going to work in the transfer portal era.
Well, he's 60 now, and obviously there was upside of going to coach in Jacksonville. It's like, okay, I won a lot of games here when I was at Florida. Now, you think Sean Collins going back into his stadium for the cocktail party? Hell no. He's gonna make Tony Khan and the guys from AEW fight him out in the parking lot.
That's right.
Tony Khan's got a neck brace on, just prevented like a Don Joy. That's what it is.
Oh my God.
You bring up a great point there. It's like he can't coach the same way he did. I think that like NIL was the biggest thing for me, besides this the absolutely toxic component. Then you also try to hire his greatest disciple in Dan Mullen, and you kicked him to the curb.
Hmm.
So, and then it's put Florida in a very tough spot. I hope Scott Strickland can figure it out, but honestly, they may need to go with a completely new approach. Like, it's like, oh, Phil Fulmer's going to figure this out with Tennessee. Well, he hired Jerry Pruitt. You need to get somebody like a Danny White to come in there and bring their guy, Josh Heupel, up from UCF, and maybe you can make that work. I don't know. I don't know who that specifically would be, but like you're kind of looking for like the next up and coming AD at maybe a smaller school, and maybe you can make it work at Florida. But I feel bad for their fans. I feel that like they don't
Hmm.
deserve this. This is I mean, this is my I do not like Florida at all, but like it's the same thing with Georgia Tech when they were terrible. I'm like, I hate seeing a rival look bad because it makes Georgia look bad by comparison. Everyone's like, well, they didn't beat anybody good. I'm like, well, our rivals stink. And you want to see everybody kind of get back to good. You want your games to matter. And you want to feel like your best is actually going up against somebody else's best versus something less than that.
No, 100%. I think the worst part, the thing that makes me feel the worst for Florida fans is that they've been gaslit all offseason by Billy Napier. Like Billy Napier was preaching. I mean, we didn't buy it, but I think a lot of Florida fans took the catnip and were like, "Oh, Billy Napier says he's confident in this team. Billy Napier says this team is gonna, surprise some people and make all these low expectations look a little bit silly." What we saw in week one was not that. What we saw was the complete opposite of that. We saw Florida look worse than they have at any point in Billy Napier's tenure, which is a low bar because they have not been that good since he arrived there. So like, this isn't this is not a one. I saw some fans online who were still not necessarily defending Billy Napier, but like explaining the situation. They were like, "Oh, this is because Mullen wasn't recruiting. This is because this, that, and the other." Brother, that is not the reason this is happening. That is not the reason this is happening at all. This is Billy Napier trying to, I don't know. It's almost like delusions of grandeur in some ways. Like everything he thinks everything he touches is King Midas and it turns to gold, but it's not. It's not necessarily turning to crap, but when you don't like foster the good things that you have or foster like trying to replace things that you lose in this modern era of college football in the transfer portal, you're not going to have success. It's just point blank period. And so the fact that this fan base was gaslit into thinking that there's something they're not, that's tough. Like that's not something you want from any team. And like I understand it is the coach's job to at least ignite some excitement in the fan base, but there's a way to do that without just outright lying to them.
I would totally agree. I mean, God, King Midas couldn't even open a water bottle.
Dude, tough scenes, man.
But the reason I'm kind of more due Host than I initially was, because you're initially we're like in the offseason, like Florida's going to be like 4-8. That's what I projected them to be. But
Yeah.
it's like it's just a dead man walking situation. Let somebody eat all those L's before you bring somebody in. But I also think that like they may go big game hunting for a head coach, so to speak. And like this gives them enough time to kind of like, grease the palms. It's like, okay, Lane, would you actually come? Eli, would you actually come?
Hmm.
Jed, would you actually leave after 1 year? So there may be other candidates out there too. Maybe Glenn Schumann turns heel. I don't know. But like this is not working under Billy Napier. They need a Power Five head coach. And I think they need to go with a guy who's an active Power Five head coach right now. Because everything else is like running counter to what they actually need, which is a guy who knows what to do.
No, 100%. And like I'm with you. Like we knew this was going to be a dead man walking situation with the schedule that Florida faces, but I think there was at that point before we saw what it looked like in week one, there was a point to be made that like let someone else take those bullets. Like let someone else take the heat for all that. Let Billy Napier, the guy you're going to push out the door, let him be the one. So you're not putting unnecessary scar tissue on assistants that you might want to keep around. Or if it's, say they came in and like impressed you in some ways, but the results weren't necessarily there on the field, like if that's the case, you're not going to be able to keep the fan base isn't going to allow you to keep them around. So like I thought there was some merit to that idea. Now I don't see any merit to it because Billy Napier's clearly lost this program. And like that's an all-encompassing term when I say that. He's lost this team. This team doesn't give a S about him, dude. Like I don't know if you watch their body language, but like he's yelling at them and they could not care less. They're ready to go to the sidelines and just cash their paycheck cuz like they they could not care less. The fan base obviously completely out on him. You have you're setting your recruits by Miami's tunnel so Miami's players can go and be like, don't come to Florida, don't go to Gainesville, you come into Miami next year. And like everything about this has turned against Billy Napier to a point like I already thought we were nearing the point of no return. We're there. we might be past it. And so like honestly, I would fire like I was surprised if it wasn't an interim AD, I do wonder if he would have been fired after week 1, legitimately.
It's um it's confusing. I mean, it might be like you're talking like a Scott Frost or like a Herm Edwards, very early termination. But we mentioned Alex Golash as a potential like
Hmm.
replacement too. I wouldn't go there if I was him. I would go to a different job. I feel like that's just too toxic right now. He could make it work because he's at USF, he's been at UCF, he's been at Tennessee, he's Ohio State alum. It's like there's all like he can work anywhere. Just this is not the good entry point right now.
Yeah.
I guess my last question for you before we move on. We know we want Jed Fish to get this job, but between Gus, Eli, and Lane, who would you think would you like to take that job of them, and who would be most likely to take that job?
I think my answer is the same for both. And I think it's Eli.
Mhm.
I think Drink taking over that program would be really good because the thing that I think has been most impressive with me about what Drinkwitz has done in at Missouri is it wasn't in the program wasn't in the best of shape when he took it over, and he was able to obviously rehabilitate that. But the way he's rehabilitated it, he has done a phenomenal job of taking advantage of any advantage that Missouri has. And Missouri does not have the same amount of advantages that the University of Florida does. So if you use the transitive property and say, okay, if he goes to Florida and he uses every advantage he has to in his favor, then that's how you rebuild Florida up to what Florida should be. That's how you rebuild Florida up to being a playoff contender. And so, like, I think Drink has proven at Missouri that, and perhaps to the point where the Tigers in that program are almost like tapped out on resources, like they may be at a ceiling of what that program can be. Whereas you go to Florida and you do that, the ceiling is a national championship. We've seen that. We know that for a fact. So, like, you get someone who has proven that they know how to use the resources, they know how to coach up, they know, and more. I think one of the things that is also standing out with Billy Napier that he has done a poor job of, but that Drink has done a fantastic job of in his career at Missouri is highlighting talent at the coordinator positions to help you out, to make your job easier, to make your life easier, to make this recruiting, to make the on-field coaching a lot better, a lot more effective. So I think that like when I look at Drink, I think he is the perfect candidate to potentially save this program outside of Jed Fish, who we both really like for this job. But I also think that again, if Drink does believe Missouri is at their ceiling, if they, especially if they were to like miss the playoff this year, I do think it's more likely than not that he could be enticed by this, especially with a big paycheck.
It's absolutely Drink. I was sitting there thinking, like, I need a fifth name. I thought about Mike Loxley too, but because I thought, like, he's tapped out there in Maryland, really good offensive line. People respect him, Nick Saban coaching tree and everything like that. But like, he is a Marylander or who's from DC, so maybe not. I thought about Lane, but Lane's got it made there
Yeah,
in Tuscaloosa. I just not Tuscaloosa in Oxford. He had it made in Tuscaloosa too, but it's like
Lane's got it made wherever he wants to go, baby.
I think that like he can win a national championship at Ole Miss with the resources. I think he's got a really good rapport there. He seems to be happy living his best life out there. And I think Gus Malzahn, I think he would take Arkansas for sure over Florida and
Mhm.
probably South Carolina again because I don't feel he's going to get flayed in the parking lot. But I also feel the thing with Eli is the other two have been humbled. He has not been humbled yet, and
Mhm.
Eli is kind of due for like the alpha nerd becoming a supervillain and having like a tremendous heel turn. He had that one good year at App State, kind of riding the coattails of Scott Satterfield, or just the predecessor to that. And then you're also right though, like the resources may be tapped out there at Mizzou. If they can really only go 9-3 there, you go 11-1 there in Florida because with what Drake's done is he has thrived at like it's getting St. Louis. Kansas City's not as many players. It's in the metro area, but like in Florida, you've got Tampa, you've got Miami, you've got Jacksonville, you've got Orlando. You've got four really big cities. You can also pull people out of Atlanta and Birmingham
Mhm.
and Baton Rouge, New Orleans if you want. So I would say it's definitely, I would say it's definitely Drake for sure. And I don't know. Okay. I thought you were doing something there, bud. This is the dog pot. Bosco, come here, bud. This is
It's the Trailer Park Dogs episode. That's what it's boiled down to. But no,
I
you're
know.
right. And then like the one thing I would say with Gus is he like I think we both like Gus Malzahn as a coach because one of the things like we said after week 0 is, there's something to be said in college football for a team and a coach who knows what they are. And Gus always knows what he is. Gus is going to do Gus Bus things. And for better or worse, that's what it is. But I do think that what Florida doesn't need right now is someone who is as much or as heavy of a retread as Gus Malzahn would be. Like we've seen Gus do this plenty of times. Like we know what Gus Malzahn is, whereas we've never seen Eli Drinkwitz at this level. We've never seen Eli or Lane Kiffin in a situation like Florida as the head coach necessarily, particularly this version of Lane Kiffin, I should say. That's probably the better way to put it. Like as high as we think the ceiling is at Ole Miss, I think we can both agree that Florida and Oxford are like two different, or Gainesville and Oxford are two different things. They're two different beasts to handle. So like there is an unknown factor of what Lane would look like in that situation. I think we know what Gus would look like in that situation. For Arkansas, I think that's a very advantageous thing because we know that Arkansas right now, although I'm, I'm it was Arkansas Pine Bluff in week 1, so I'm not gonna like lose my cookies over it, but like I'm intrigued. I'm gonna tune into Arkansas Oklahoma State. That game has my attention this week, but like if Arkansas does end up having the season we expected them to coming into this year, they need someone who's going to get them to bowl games and get the program stabilized. I trust Gus Malzahn to do that. Do I trust Gus Malzahn to get Florida into competing for national championships and playoff spots? Not particularly. I really don't. Whereas I think the upside for Eli and Lane is absolutely there.
Yes, sir. Arkansas Pine Bluff. I always say Pine Bluff.
I
It's,
mean,
it's
dude, it is a tongue twister because like you're already just trying to not say Arkansas because that's how it's spelled. So you're tricking your brain there to begin with, even if you don't realize it, and then you got to add in Pine Bluff, which is just doesn't feel like a real place at all.
hyphens are stupid and this is false start.
That's right.
But you bring up a good point with like the retread component. Florida would be Gus's fourth program because he's been at Arkansas State, Auburn, and now UCF. This
hmm
would be the sixth team Lane leaves. You've got the Raiders, you've got Tennessee, you've got USC, Florida Atlantic, Ole Miss. So like maybe you need something a little bit less. Whereas with Drink, this is only three because you've been at App
hmm
State for a year and Mizzou for about five. So I get that. But you know what? I think Gus Malzahn would say if he was going to be coming over to the program, he would say, "Save me some of those sweet and powdered chicken things. Playoffs, you kidding me?" Um, we hinted this last week. Texas is absolutely going to dog walk Michigan in their highly anticipated week 2 matchup. It's not going to be close. Yes, there's a way where maybe Michigan wins. Like Quinn Ewers has to basically shatter his pelvis, and
hmm
Mason Graham has to like eat him. But there's no way Michigan is going to blow out Texas. That's the only outcome that's not possible in this game.
Agreed, 100%. Honestly, like I can see a world where I'm not the way I'm prognosticating the game is that it's a blowout that doesn't look like a blowout on the scoreboard necessarily for Texas because like there's no point. I think that Texas has the offensive firepower to attack this Michigan defense, which is the one calling card that Michigan still has. This defense is still very damn good. But I do think that Texas has the personnel to somewhat mitigate that, particularly up front with guys like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. I think that Texas has one of the best offensive lines in the country, quite frankly. And so, like, I think that when you're looking at that factor, Texas should be able to block them at least adequately, give Quinn Ewers some time to attack downfield a little bit, attack and consistently run this offense. The thing that really concerns me for on the Michigan side of this is obviously the quarterback situation. Like it didn't look good with Warren or Orgy, and like Orgy can't throw the ball, and I'm not sure Warren can either, even though they let him. So like I'm not sure what Michigan's gonna do at the quarterback position, but they didn't run the ball well. And the offensive line, when you look at what they did in terms of like PFF grades and just kind of the eye test against Fresno State, this is a much worse offensive line than it was a year ago. That was one of the big strengths of Michigan. They lost a lot of people from that line. They did retain, I believe, two starters from it, but they did lose a lot of talent on there. And so I think it showed against the Fresno State team, who, even with Texas losing to Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, they replenished a little bit in the portal. It may not be as good, but it is still a very good defensive line. So, like, I go across the board and I don't see an advantage that Michigan, not only that they have, but that they're able to take advantage of. Like, I just see either neutrals or advantage Texas, and that's not a good spot. Maybe the one advantage that Michigan has is that this is in the big house, and maybe Quinn Ewers does show some warts in there, but for the faults of Quinn Ewers that people want to point out, I would like to point out that playing on the road and hostile environments has not been one of his issues. One of the best game, arguably the best game he played all of last year was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Right.
So I'm not concerned about that moment, that stage at the big house being too much for him.
No, he does not like the team from up north, and I think you're right. Basically, everything is either push or in the favor of Texas. Maybe not necessarily the defensive line for like Michigan. I think that may
Yeah.
be a huge advantage as well. But again, Michigan has to win one way. They basically have to like win with Mason Graham. He's got to be the best player on the field, which is possible. And then I think from there, it's like you go. I hate to say it, but like Quinn Ewers has to like you have to remove him from the equation, and you put Arch Manning out there. And then he's a baby Huey, Bambi in the headlights, and he's got no chance. But like you're talking about a 5% chance of maybe that happening. It's possible, but again, I don't see that happening. I see Texas winning pretty comfortably. They're a 7.5 point favorite on the road versus the defending national champions. That speaks volumes. That's really all you need to know.
No, 100%. And I mean, you look at let's just go into week one. Like, let's overreact to just what we saw in week one. Okay. Michigan was up 23-10 on a Fresno State team that lost Jeff Tedford in the middle of the offseason that we're projecting to be probably bottom half of the Mountain West this season. Like, I like Mikey Keene, but like I just think that the coaching turnover in the roster is just not there for this Fresno State team to do much. And Michigan, until Will Johnson had a pick six in the final 2 minutes of the game, he took it back for 90 yards because Fresno State was driving again. Like, that game was much closer than it had to be. Then you go to the flip side of that. Texas dog walked a Colorado State team that is not bad. A Colorado
Right.
State team that returns a lot of experience and experience that was quite, frisky last year. And so, like, and they had no chance. Like, that defense completely suffocated everything Colorado State wanted to do. Quinn Ewers was done after 2 quarters. And, like, if he came out for the third quarter, it was to hand the ball off. Like, they
Exactly.
they absolutely packed it in the entire second half and still won 52-0. So, like, just where these teams are, like, I'm not ruling out the possibility of Michigan getting better later in the season, but the where this matchup is on the schedule is so advantageous for Texas because Texas already looks close to a fully formed product, whereas Michigan looks nowhere close to that.
2 points here before we move on to our next topic. I love this. This is you bring up a great point about the Mountain West comparables. Obviously, we like Boise State, UNLV the most in that league, but then like that
Yes.
next cluster of teams, Colorado State's definitely there, maybe Fresno State. And Fresno State, you're dealing with like major coaching changes. Like Jeff Tedford like had to abruptly retire like in July for health reasons. And Jay Norvell is doing a pretty good job there at Colorado State, recruiting, kind of taking a lot of the juice that he had at Nevada, bringing that there.
Hmm.
And the Rams have one of the best group of five prospects there and wide receiver Torrey Horton,
Yeah.
and they were rendered useless. So, but then you also got to factor in like the coaching changes. So this is Sherrone Moore's first real stab at being a head coach. Wink Martindale's coming to the college game for the first time in what decades. Then who I don't even know who the Michigan offensive play caller is. You look at Texas. Sark is still there, and yes, lost Jeff Choate, but you still have it's either Pete. I think it's Pete or Nick Kwiatkowski. He's their DC. He's really good.
Yeah,
And then
it's Nick. Just
Nick
I'm pretty sure it's
Nick
Nick.
Nick. And then obviously AJ Milwauee's been there, the quarterbacks coach the entire time. So like they've lost people to NFL and other jobs. Texas looks like a well-run, well-oiled machine.
No, it that's absolutely a great way to put it. And like, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Choate the co-DC as well? Like,
Yeah, it was him and Kwiatkowski were both like they were sharing roles there. I think I don't know exactly. I think Choate might be more of like a linebacker, like defensive line coach. I think Kwiatkowski's more linebackers, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, and so like when you look at that, like that's even still some continuity. Like you're not even necessarily replacing a defensive coordinator. You're just like consolidating the role essentially. So like the continuity is still there. And you would think that losing Jeff Choate, considering how good Nevada has looked through week 0 and week 1, like that's obviously not insubstantial loss, but like at the same time, you're still maintaining some semblance of continuity. Whereas Michigan was thrown into upheaval, not just with the coaching staff, with the roster too. Like Texas lost some pieces, yes, of course. Like they lost to Xavier Worthy, they lost Byron Murphy, they lost to Devondre Sweat, they lost a lot of guys, but at the same time, they still they still maintained so much of their talent. And then, like they did last year, And like we talked about earlier in this program, like Sark is one of the best in the country at supplementing the roster through the portal. Like
Yes,
exactly the way the portal should be used properly. Sark's one of the best in the country at doing that. And I think we're already seeing it. Like you lose Xavier Worthy and you bring in an Isaiah Bond. And I was watching some cut ups of Isaiah Bond just route running. Dude, he was putting those Colorado State DBs through absolute hell. Like they had no shot of keeping up with him, and it was very Xavier Worthy-esque. Like he's not as fast as Xavier Worthy, but he does have game-changing speed, game-changing agility, and quickness. So like he has this roster is not that much different from what we had a year ago. And Texas was in the 14 college football playoff last year. Michigan's roster is substantially different, as is their coaching staff. There's just we're talking about two programs at two very different stages, and I think that plays out in Ann Arbor.
absolutely. Isaiah Bond was taking those Colorado State Rams, burning them like a fat tire, and then bottling them in a New Belgian brewery.
Oh my God. Oh, that's good. Shouts to New Belgium, dude. Good beer.
Definitely, yes. New Belgium is the best beer in this.
That's right. There's a New Belgium brewery and they opened up a second location in Asheville. So you know, love the North Carolina the breweries. I miss it greatly here in New Mexico where the breweries are they're there.
Oh, no question. Mills River, that's the brewery capital of North Carolina.
That's right. Shouts to Sierra Nevada, New Belgium, Wicked Weed. I could go for days. Speaking of, it's my day off and now I want a beer. So
You know what? Same. Obviously, birthday week's coming up. Going to hang out with my mom later. Going to get some beer and not dog sit after this. It's going to be absolutely wonderful. But at the end of the day, my mom's going to come pick me up, and she's going to ask me this one question: Is this all about cheeseburgers?
it's always about cheeseburgers, baby.
If that'll diffuse the situation.
That'll diffuse the situation for sure.
Bubbles just Randy Babani loves him some cheeseburgers, and Bubbles likes to diffuse situations, even though that blind man who lives in a shed certainly makes it worse.
Hey man, it's the thought that counts.
And that is precisely what the Associated Press did here. Yes, we're going to read from Mort Manuel's manual a little bit and just kind of react to some of the stuff that we saw from the second AP Top 25. There were some winners and some losers. I would say right off the bat, the biggest winner is USC.
Oh yeah, USC or Miami. One of those two, I think you have to have as your biggest winner. Like they both made big jumps. Miami up to 12, USC up to 13. Like those two teams who I think like in the grand scheme of things, we could probably outside of Georgia, who was already the number one team in the country. So like you're not going to see that necessarily wholly reflected in the poll, but like in terms of teams basically outside of the top 10, no one did themselves more of a favor than what those two teams did in week 1, and that's very much reflected in the top 25.
Oh, no question. Yeah, those two teams certainly put themselves in a position. Miami is like clearly the best team in the ACC right now. And then USC is like, you know what? There's going to be four teams making the playoff out of the Big Ten, and we're one of them. We think Penn State is, and we're not so sure if it's going to be Ohio State or Oregon after week 2. Yeah, Oregon took a big hit. They looked really bad, and if they lose versus Boise State, that might be it for them, dude.
Yeah, oh, if they lose to Boise State, that's tough. The thing I'm trying to marry with Oregon right now is I firmly believe that they weren't trying to show anything against Idaho. Like this is definitely one
Right.
of those games. Like you have a very big game against a G5 power in Boise State. Like you don't want to put anything on film, and I totally understand that. And so that's one factor. But the factor that really worries me, or the two factors I should say, the injuries on the offensive line. They were without a starting center, and they were starting basically a guy who's I'm not sure if he's a walk on, but he might as well be. Like that's who they were starting at center. And that's looking currently like that might be who's starting against Boise State. Now, the Boise State defense didn't look that good, but if you have problems on the offensive line in your Oregon and you have a smaller quarterback in Dylan Gabriel, you have a running game that is turned over a little bit, that's not a good recipe, especially because Boise State wants to get you in a shootout. We just saw that last week. So if Boise State gets you in a shootout and you have a compromised offensive line, that's not good. Speaking of the shootout, Oregon's defense, which we was a supposed to be a calling card after the way Dan Lanning recruited that side of the ball and in the trenches specifically, their defensive line wasn't getting much push against an Idaho team that is not very good. So that worries me. I do have concerns about Oregon. I'm not going to sound the alarms yet because again, I don't think they were intending on showing anything against Idaho, but at the same time, if they come out against Boise State and we see any signs of like, scratches in the armor, I'm going to be worried about what this team is going to be.
Yes, I wrote about this for fansided.com. Five people who need to have a good week two to stay in the Heisman race. Look, if Dylan Gabriel gets outshined by Ashton Ginty, that might be it for him. Our pick to win the Heisman, like at that point, if you win like 27-24 over Boise State and then Ashton Ginty rushes for 3 touchdowns, you throw for like 175 touchdown and pick, like I'm sorry, like you're a 6 year
Mhm.
senior and that's it. And we know that Dylan Gabriel was like the front runner after winning Red River last year and everything like that. But the big concern I have with Oregon, and again, I totally agree with you, they didn't want to show anything.
Yeah.
It looked like a Chip Kelly, Mark Helfrich team as opposed to a Dan Lanning team.
Yeah.
God, it didn't even look like a Mike Bellotti team. That needs to have some of that grit. You can't try to finesse your way. I don't know if Spencer Danielson's good, but I know that Ashton Genty is good, and I know that Boise State's a really strong program that lives for these moments. So, yes, that was not good for Oregon. I also think LSU took a hit too. I think they're kind of basically went like they can still make the playoff, but like this is a win I thought they would have, and now that the Magnolia Bowl with Ole Miss is kind of like you're either going to make it or not based on that game.
No, I mean LSU did definitely take a hit. I'm not sounding the alarms with LSU. And maybe that's a little bit of my preseason USC belief bias in that because I have a feeling that that loss in a game that was essentially down to the wire, like it would LSU had the last full possession, or excuse me, USC had the last full possession, and that's why they won the game. Like, you could say whatever you want about LSU executing in those moments, but at the end of the day, like it was a tight game. LSU's defense looked improved from last year, even with Miller Moss having a nice game. Like they still held them to 27 points, which last year's LSU defense, they're probably allowing like 54 with the way that offense was moving in that game. So like we saw improvements there. I'm not gonna write LSU off because I still think they're a very good football team. Garrett Nussmeier looked very good throughout that entire game. So like I'm definitely not writing Brian Kelly and the Tigers off, but you're right, they dropped down to 18. So like that tells you what they have to do. Like it's in front of you to quote Yankees manager Aaron Boone, his favorite quote. It's right there in front of these guys. But like they have to take care of business. There's no room for error after this point because that was a game you kind of needed to have margin for error in the SEC.
He was ecstatic about that game, noted USC alum, former USC baseball player, and
That's
every
right.
and everything like that. I would also say that like a team that really benefited a lot was Alabama. And
Yeah.
they wiped the floor with Western Kentucky, a team that I had getting to the CUSA championship, and you probably have like third or fourth place in that conference behind the Jacksonville States of the world. But Tyson Helton's been there for a while. We know what the offense is capable there up in Bowling Green, Kentucky. But they were rendered useless versus Alabama and a new defensive staff, an entirely new staff there under Kalen DeBoer. Shout out Kane Womack and Maurice Linguist really being stellar on that side of the ball. But Alabama's sitting at 4, being probably a little more overvalued than I would suspect. But like again, like it's going to be a program where like they made the playoff last year. They may not know that they're not as good as they were a year ago, and they're playing with house money right now. I thought it was a really good showing for them to go up one spot in the new AP poll.
No, absolutely agreed. And like I think the one thing that Alabama could not do was come out and just look any kind of lackluster. And they didn't do that. They looked great. They looked exactly like you would want them to against a Western Kentucky team. Um, I'm not going to say it was without concern. I was listening to Cover Three podcast not too long ago, and Bud Elliott pointed out that Western Kentucky receivers were open. So I went and watched some of it, watched some of the looks from the defense. The young DBs for Alabama were allowing some players to get open. They just have the athleticism to cover that space, particularly on the back end, safeties coming down and making plays. But, that's something to keep an eye out on for. But, like, in terms of what Alabama needed to do to maintain the perception with Kalen DeBoer taking over, they absolutely did everything. And, like, I'm not going to talk negatively about the Crimson Tide because they had one box to check and they checked it very emphatically.
Yes, I think that they're going to get better. And shout out, this is a Damani Jackson podcast. He is
Yes.
adjacently related to this program. It's like the Arizona State podcast works with his godfather's girlfriend. It's basically, and we
Nice.
think the world of Damani. He's great. So really excited to see him be able to make the most of it and have a really great year there at Alabama. Maybe he'll be able to play there for two. But yeah, he's a guy that's certainly on our radar come NFL draft time, either next year or 2 years later.
No, 100%. I'm gonna go to another winner, another one who actually only moved up one spot in the poll, but I still think is a big winner. Penn State, man, moving up to number
Yeah.
8 in the poll. Like the fact that they had them moving up, the fact that they had Penn State now just one spot behind Oregon in the poll, like that tells me a lot of what Penn State showed. And we talked about it, after the game. Like Andy Kotelnicki's offense looked like it took pretty quick, and Drew Lohr looked like a different player than what we saw last year. And so like again, I don't want to get at after week one, you never want to get over your skis and start saying, oh, this, that, and the other. But everything that we were hoping we would see from an Andy Kotelnicki offense in Happy Valley, we saw against decent Power Five competition. Like it wasn't against the Cupcake, it was against West Virginia and enemy territory. So like there's a lot of good signs about Penn State, and it's reflected in the poll. Like there's still a little trepidation. We're not going to vault them up into the top five anything just yet, but like there's definitely some belief that this Penn State team is what everyone was hoping they would be, and if you're optimistic about them.
Code Nicky.
Kotonigi.
He's You're absolutely right that he might be ready to be a head coach. I don't know if you paid attention to. I mean, you were watching football. North Carolina was playing on Thursday. Kansas had its issues with Lindenwood, and
Yeah.
I don't know what was going on with Jalen Daniels. Is it kind of like the KJ Jefferson thing, where he's a shell of himself, or maybe Andy Kolnicki was the secret sauce? He needs to play really well versus Illinois, or else he's got no shot at the Heisman.
No, he absolutely does. And I mean, uh my Stacking the Box college football edition co-host Reed Wallach, he's picking Illinois outright on the money line to upset Kansas in that game. So that tells you what Kansas looked like without Kotoniki.
How are you on Illinois entering the season? I had them 6-6, 7-5. Were you kind of thinking that they're dangerous?
Yeah, so I had them, I believe my projections, I had them about kind of in that 6-7 range. Like I think like I do it with like toss ups. So like I'll give you a half win. And I think I had them ended up having them at like 6.5 wins. So like that's kind of where I came down on them. But I do think that 6.5 wins allow for some upside because Luke Altmaier at the end of last year looked pretty good. Like Luke Altmaier was throwing, like he improved as the season went on and as he got healthier at the end of last year. So that piqued my interest. I think the big thing that I saw is Illinois' offensive line looked really improved last week. And I understand it wasn't the highest level of competition, but they did look improved. And that's a big thing that they did through the portal. Like finding offensive linemen in the portal is one of the hardest things to do in that avenue. And the fact that they were able to find two guys to step in there, that's a big deal for them. So like I think this defense is going to bounce back. Last year was the first year without Ryan Walters, and I think that showed a little bit. You also lost guys like Devin Witherspoon, who frankly don't come through Illinois too often.
Right.
Like that's a top five pick. You don't see that coming out of Illinois too often. So like it seems like the experience is stabilizing there. So like I think there's real upside there for Illinois to not like be in Big Ten title contention, not to be in playoff contention, but to potentially win like 8, maybe 9 games, like steal one that they shouldn't. And so like this is one of those games where I think we'll really see what the upside of Illinois is.
Yeah, like with the Ryan Walters, Devin Witherspoon here, the giant killers of the world. Yeah, they could certainly
Yeah.
be that there in the Big Ten. I know we're both probably down on obviously Michigan and Florida State and Clemson here. You have anybody else you're down on? If not, I'll go with one other team that was a big winner from the poll.
Uh, well, I'm gonna actually combine those two, if that's cool with you. But
Yeah,
NC State's still ranked 24 after struggling with Western Carolina. But I don't feel better about NC State after
yeah.
week one. I can assure you of that. We'll see what NC State truly is when they play this Tennessee team this week, which is a game I think we're both really excited for. It's a game that doesn't have the name brand value of a Michigan Texas, but I think is going to frankly be a better game, a more fun game to watch. So I'm intrigued by that because again, I think NC State is another team that probably didn't show too terribly much against Western Carolina and almost got caught for it. As opposed to, Oregon kind of kept Idaho at arm's length in that game, even though they didn't look their best. NC State did not keep them at arm's length, and then they had to scramble in the fourth quarter to make something happen. But yeah, the fact that NC State is still ranked after that performance, I'm guessing the AP voters are seeing the same things that I just said, but at the same time, like if you don't prove it this week, you're gone, brother. Like you're not even sniffing the poll for a long time.
Yeah, I found it very interesting that they still maintain their spot. And again, it's like we'll just see what happens with Tennessee. Very much an obvious look ahead game there with Western Carolina. But I got to tout my Georgia Bulldogs taking pretty much every first place vote. They looked
Yeah.
absolutely dominant versus Clemson. And then again, it was like Ohio State looked good at times versus Akron, but again, not as strong as Georgia looked versus Clemson. And you're like, Oregon have a good week. Michigan really struggled. Penn State might actually be the second best team in the country right now.
Yeah.
We still got to see, but Georgia's definitively won. We'll see what they do. How they look against Kentucky in their SEC opener in a couple weeks. But like it's Tennessee Tech, and I got to figure out how to watch this game on SEC Network Plus.
Yeah, shouts to not putting the national championship favorites on any watchable network. We really appreciate that, ESPN.
ESPN Plus of the streaming services, it's the green bastard from parts unknown.
That's factually correct.
Bubbles is a pseudonym as wrestler. Yes, we are going to go with the guy who he calls himself El Bastardo Verde, but that's just Antonio, so he's the green bastard. So Cody, where are you and I and Antonio going this week?
There's only one place we can go, and that's Auburn Cal, baby. We're going to
Yeah,
Auburn, Alabama, and it's going to be a glorious sight. Justin Wilcox and Hugh Freeze, I can't think of two different individuals that are going to have to shake hands multiple times on Saturday. It's going to be beautiful. I think Antonio might try to join them down on the field to shake their hands with them and just yell Bulldog at them. It's going to be absolutely wonderful.
obviously we got to unpack a little bit more what happened last week in Stillwater and everything. He was a little more subdued there. I think he was just trying to make amends with Gundy because he really likes Gundy. He thought they fought because remember he threw him into the lake over not wearing a shirt.
Yep.
Uh, but he helped Gator hunt rabbits and they prevailed over the Jackrabbits. But I think not Anthony, Antonio, he's gonna go by Anthony. That's on his fake ID there for Auburn. I'm like,
Yeah,
dude, you're 60.
you still gotta have the fake ID in Auburn because you never know what's gonna happen in those parts of Alabama.
This is actually where I ran into Antonio for the first time. Prayer Shirt and Hair Weekend. He was the Sigma Nu Poncho guy, so I know what
That's
he's
right.
capable of. So the big thing that Antonio wants to do is get some burner phones because he wants to call Jerry Jones and get more phones to have him more on speed dial. And Freeze
Yay!
Mobile is going to hook him up, dude. Jerry, como
Yay!
están?
Come on, stop Bulldog. Bulldog.
He also, you mentioned he wants to get on the field. You saw what Marshawn Lynch did at the Skittle Stadium, and he thinks he's going to be able to do that there at Jordan Hare. I'm like, no, they're going to find you, and that's not going to go hot for you. But he is interested in helping Justin Wilcox defect, even though I don't think he really knows what that means.
Yeah, he has no idea what it means. He's I think he's trying to work up some fake visas, some fake paperwork and stuff like that. But it's I tried to tell him it's not that serious. We just need to find him another job, and he just wasn't having any of that. He's like Bulldog, and we're just going through with this.
His paperwork, I was wondering what that was. So I saw his suitcase, and it was hanging out the side, and it was a Scooby-Doo coloring book.
Yeah, it's a look. I didn't say it was good or well thought out paperwork, but he stayed mostly in the lines, so that's a win for Anthony.
The problem is he made a Scooby-Doo red because Bulldog.
Bulldog, go dogs.
But yeah, we're intrigued about this game anyway. We think that Auburn is sneaky good. I have them going 8-4, and I've got Cal going 7-5 in its first year in the ACC. I think the winner of this game has the potential to possibly crack the top 25 during the season. We know what Jaden Zach Ott is all about at running back, and then we'll see what happens with every rose has its Peyton Thorne there at quarterback for Auburn.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that, and again, lower level of competition, so I don't want to read too much into week one, but the one thing I saw from Peyton Thorne is that Auburn's got some dudes at wide receiver now.
Yeah,
And that was something they did not have last year. I don't think I think Peyton Thorne is, to borrow a term from my guy Bud Elliott, Jag plus. Like he's not just a guy, but he's a little bit better than that. But he's not like a superstar or anything like that. I don't think anyone would make that mistake with Peyton Thorne. But I do think that he is proving that he has earned that plus. Like he's not just a guy. So when you put dudes around him at wide receiver, that can elevate him and this Auburn team to heights like, you haven't projected at 8-4. If this is if this kind of takes off, if we see something really nice against the Cal defense that at bare minimum under Justin Wilcox, we know is going to be well coached. Like you got to start thinking, is Auburn like a 9-win team? Are they someone who could knock
maybe.
off like and really cause some chaos in the SEC? So this is a fun one to take Antonio to. Vibes are going to be immaculate. Like you've got Cal making the cross country road trip. Antonio's going to be there to try to liven that crowd up. It's gonna be a good time.
He's got his toilet paper and he's happy. Even maybe if Bud Elliott copyrights Jag Plus, we got to find our own version of that. I'm gonna call Peyton Thorne. He's a super dude. Like
Oh yeah, super dude. I like it.
so it's like he's just a regular dude. He's just a guy. But with the power of Hugh Freeze and burner phones, he becomes a superhero. I was watching with the Arizona State podcast, Shazam. You ever watched that movie?
Okay. I
That
have
movie's
not seen Shazam. I was actually talking. This is the third time in the last week that Shazam has been brought up to me. So I guess I need to watch it. The universe is sending me all kinds of signs.
it's um it's great. Zachary Levi is amazing. The Jeff Goldblum villain is kind of great too. Billy Batson and the what Brian Grazer's nephew from like Arrested Development. Like
Mm.
that's the kid's name is Freddie Freeman, which is hilarious.
Oh my God.
uh, yes, 10 out of 10. Definitely watch that movie. It's really funny, and we I do not regret it at all. It doesn't matter. And also, the best part is like it doesn't matter if the NC State podcast likes it or not. It's still a pretty good movie. It's
Hey, the NC State podcast is going on a work trip, so I'm gonna need some content to consume by myself, and I think Shazam I just made the list.
I know, man. We've been over this and over this. You can't not be feeling this. Yes, baby. We are going with some just like Debbie Kane with some better than Ezra to wrap the show up. Gosh, I've been in my bag with this. Bosco can't keep me down.
That's right. Dogs are running wild, but we're thriving.
Yes, I was thinking about this with Better Than Ezra. I saw them play at the 40 Watt back in Athens. Really good live band. Basically, OAR tried to be them, and OAR is not better than Ezra.
Unless you ask people from Maryland, which has like a really like vicious OAR following for whatever reason, something I learned in college, which was a very weird experience. Like they're like, "Have you ever heard of OAR?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, they're fine." And they're like, "Fine, they're the greatest." Like they talk about people from Baltimore specifically talk about OAR like people from Charlottesville talk about Dave Matthews, like legitimately, and I don't understand it in the slightest.
Aren't they like an Ohio State band? Or they're somewhere in that region. It's crazy.
I just happened to end up in the sphere of a lot of people from Baltimore when I was in college, and like I swear to God, every single one of them, like just I almost said something that's probably not copacetic, but just absolutely like lost their minds over OAR, and I did not understand it in the slightest.
The kids in my high school who loved 311, were not good students for the most part. Uh, I kind of dabbled in there a little bit more, but the people who loved them some OAR and quoted, "That was a crazy night of poker" in their yearbook photo. Those were the kids who grew up with crown molding and absolutely no adversity in their lives, and they still haven't had any because life's been handed to them on a silver platter. Maybe Peyton Manning loves some OAR.
Arch definitely does. Arch is a big OAR guy.
Uh, do you love me? Fast, do you love me? Let's start with some good. Better than Ezra's signature song. What game you have for
So
that?
I'm going to El Assico for that.
Yeah.
Iowa State, because I think both these teams are good, man. Like that's literally the reason. Like I just think that what we saw from Iowa's offense, I understand it was Illinois State, but like they weren't doing that against anyone last year. They put up 40 points. They threw 3 touchdowns to wide receivers. These are not things that we see from the Iowa offense literally ever in the past 2 years. So the fact that they're doing that, I think Iowa might actually be good. And then Iowa State, like went into the season thinking they were good. I like Rocco Becht. I like what this team. I like the adversity they fought through last year, and I think they're going to build upon that. So like, I think this is just it's El Astico, which is a very tongue-in-cheek nickname for this game, for this rivalry game, for the Cyhawk game. But I do think that Iowa State has had, it's been a house of horrors when they've had to travel to Kinnick. But I think that this is going to be a very competitive game. I think it's going to be a close game, and it's just going to be a good game, man.
They're the only people that hate the Kinnick wave. That just because like, oh no, it's like they're waving to my funeral here. I can't handle this. Let's go back to Ames. Let's see if Fred Hoiberg can resuscitate me. Uh,
Exactly.
but I have Cyhawk coming up a little bit later. I bet you Jim Harbaugh would cut off Sharon Moore's right hand like Peter Pettigrew. If Michigan could still have Cade McNamara. If they had
Dude,
Cade McNamara,
100%.
Cade McNamara is good. I don't care what anyone says. He's good. And he'll be in the NFL and he'll get drafted like in the fifth round and be a backup for a long time. I love the guy. The guy's a great player. Just JJ McCarthy was inevitable. And Tim Lester, Kirk Ferentz have something pretty good there in Iowa City. So I'm bullish on that. So for mine, obviously the song Good is about lead singer Kevin Griffin coming home and seeing that like his girlfriend moved out and broke up with him. So
Mm.
searching for signs of life, but nobody's home. That would be Virginia at Wake Forest.
I have that one coming up very shortly. So
I don't really have to elaborate more on that, but which game is desperately wanting to be this game?
I told you it was very shortly. That's Virginia Wake Forest for me, because both of these programs are desperately wanting for anything other than what's going to happen in this game. This game is going to be abysmal, bro. I am, like, we've talked plenty of crap about the ACC and deservedly so this week, but this is the bottom of the barrel for the ACC right here.
You know, it's Winston's and Dave Matthews Band. Bah, 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 bah.
Yeah.
I am certain my brother-in-law is not watching this game.
Absolutely not, because he values his mental health.
I think he just likes golf more than you, to be honest with you.
I mean, fair point and fair play.
Yeah, you guys should probably play some golf at my bachelor party, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
But the game that I've got here is the game that we're going to be watching late at night. I've got Tennessee, North Carolina State in
Mm,
Charlotte. Obviously, the song I think is about Rush. I think it was Kevin Griffin was a Kappa Sig. I think it was his friend. Like their thing is they literally run to their house and they
mm.
fall down the grass or whatever. And I think it's about pledship and stuff like that. But anyway, I feel like Tennessee and North Carolina State are desperately wanting to be Georgia and Clemson in their respective leagues, and they're always falling a step behind. And whoever loses this game is going to be falling a step behind and potentially making the playoffs. This might be my favorite song by them. It oscillates. It's
Mhm.
definitely top three all the time. I love this song.
No, I mean, it's when you think of Better Than Ezra, this is the first song I think of, and it's a for good reason. It's a banger.
Oh, no question. And 3.5 minutes feels like a lifetime. Who do you have for like their like other massive hit? Like this song is so good. I love it. This is might be my favorite actually.
This is a really good song. It's not going to be a really good game, but it's going to feel like a lifetime for Middle Tennessee State as they play Ole Miss, and Ole Miss hangs a 70 burger on them. Like 3.5 minutes is going to feel like a lifetime because Ole Miss might have scored 21 points in those 3.5 minutes. It's going to be a tough scene for the Blue Raiders this week.
I kind of right there with you. A little bit better game there. I think the song is initially Kevin Griffin's like making an ode to like Graham Parsons of Flying Burrito Brothers dying, and somebody just like confiscated his body instead of flying it back to Jacksonville, and then just burned him on fire at like Joshua Tree. That's kind of what happened with Allie not making it to her graduation day. I did find out what the REM song they're referring to is. That's a Perfect Circle. It's about 3.5 minutes.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Okay.
so I was sitting there thinking about that, and 3.5 minutes, that's about how long Arkansas is going to be able to stay in their game with Oklahoma State.
Oh my God. Love it.
um, One of the songs they didn't play at the 40 watt, probably the biggest song they didn't play was At the Stars. This is a very uh, pretty good song as well, probably like one of their bigger hits too. Who do you have for this one, Cody?
So I went with Georgia Tech Syracuse for this one. I like this because the reason I went with it is, at the stars, kind of at least the phrase itself, it kind of feels like a hopeful phrase, like you're going to be at the stars in a place you maybe didn't expect to be. And so you look at Georgia Tech and Syracuse right now. Well, Georgia Tech's ranked. I don't think anyone expected the Yellow Jackets to
Yeah.
be seeing that in entering week 2 of the season. And then Syracuse looked pretty damn good with Kyle McCord. So like uh, seeing what the ACC looks like, these are two teams that are looking at it like maybe we have a chance to make a run here. Maybe we have a chance to do something. So this game in the Carrier Dome where you won't see the stars because it's a dome, they're still shooting for the stars. They're at the stars, baby.
I guess he Jim Boeheim gaslighting his players. Said, "Look at the stars. This is the dome."
It's a
Uh,
dome.
I could. I think there's two people that I can go on like a 30-minute podcast about how much I don't like it. It'd be Jim Boeheim and Carlos Beltran. This is false start. I could go on
Oh
about that
my
for days. I left somebody a voicemail completely hammered when I was 22 about how much I hate Carlos Beltran.
God. I mean, deservedly so. Carlos Beltran, yeah, thanks.
I do like Georgia Tech Syracuse. That might have actually been the backup for Antonio. I kind of intrigued by that game.
Oh yeah, dude, absolutely. It's a game I'm actually looking forward to, particularly with how the ACC has already devolved after a week and a half of action, basically.
I feel that those whoever wins that game, that could be mighty feisty. And this game, I've got Texas at Michigan because blame us who we are, hate us because we'll never get that far. Just two programs that are really full of themselves, and one of them is going to look like a complete clown show. It's probably going to be Michigan.
So I'll go ahead and move us along to the next one because I have Michigan, Texas for Trimble. And
Yeah.
let me tell you why, because this song is one of the more I would say repetitive on purpose, obviously, but you talk too much and you say too little and you think too hard, you begin to tremble. That's Michigan in this game, brother. Like everything we've heard from Michigan fans this entire offseason is that, oh, we're not going to fall off too much. Oh, we don't, oh, we're going to avoid all these penalties and stuff like that. No, you're paying the piper, brother. You're paying the piper with the NCAA, and you're paying the piper on the field against a Texas team that is better than you. So go ahead and tremble, buddy, because Ann Arbor, Big House might be trembling from the stadium early in the game. It's going to be, you can hear a pin drop by the end of this game because Texas is going to boat race them.
I do love this song too. It's I remember listening to like greatest hits and like, oh, what's this? This is so cool. So first off, this is the Arizona State podcast, or half siblings given like their surname. So spelled a little bit differently with an I as opposed to an E. So, you know, you talk too much, you say too little, you think too hard, you begin to tremble. That's just, when the phone calls keep coming in, and I'm just like, can we go out to eat, babe?
Can we please?
I actually have Alaska for this, Iowa
Mm.
State, Iowa, because you know who's watching Geraldo on TV? That would be Kirk Ferentz.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thinking about you and me, thinking about Brian.
I miss my son, my boy.
Brian Geraldo Rivera Ferentz.
That's officially his new name, whether he knows it or not.
I mean, maybe that's his mask in Slipknot. He wears a Geraldo Rivera mask.
That's his Bobby Valentine fake mustache to sneak back into the game.
No question. But he's not extraordinary. He's extraordinary. What game do you have for that one?
This was the first one I wrote down. It's Duke Northwestern, brother. That's the most extraordinary game I've ever heard in my entire life. Like a bunch of smart kids out there playing football. Kids way smarter than me that got into applied to schools that I didn't even think of. Like that's that. But the football, look, man, Malik Murphy, we like him, but I don't think the talent is around him at Duke to do a whole lot this season. Northwestern looks like they're about to pull back from what we saw last year under David Braun when he had the interim tag. So yeah, this is just going to be an extraordinary football game on Friday night.
This is an Azkaban, right?
Yes, it is an Azkaban.
Gonna be a lot of Quidditch playing out there with a bunch of really smart people who are way too smart, way too bored, and way too sober. And this is false start.
That's right. They're extraordinary in every sense of the word.
I do. I mean, I know you don't like Duke at all, but I love the pairing of Malik Murphy and Manny Diaz. Like that's going to be
Yeah.
awesome for the next 3 years. That's going to be really good.
No, I think that the roster around him still needs to be supplemented. I'm not sliding Malik Murphy. I like Malik Murphy, but I think it is Malik Murphy and the nobodies right now at Duke, unfortunately.
I feel that. And I'm going to slight two teams who I think are really full of themselves because you're extraordinary. I am talking about Colorado at Nebraska.
Yeah, we had to mention this one, and this is a good one for it.
Yes, I was on the Blog and Dirty podcast. I had Tommy Jagai of Still a Curtain to come on, and I'm like, maybe if Justin Fields or Russell Wilson doesn't work out, maybe you could draft Shedeur Sanders or Quinn Ewers at like 11, like Big Ben. Maybe you got to trade up for that. And obviously, Matt Rule is becoming more and more unlikable as I get older. I get older, he gets more unlikable, and that's it. I don't even really know what I'm doing. Phone's blowing up right now. Dog's behaving. Phone's blowing up.
Hey, if it's not one thing, it's the other. But at least the dog's not, terrorizing the house. That's always a good thing. But no, these two teams are I mean, the grand scheme of things, they are extraordinary. I'm actually really excited for this game. I think it's
Oh
going to
yeah,
be a good game because I think these two teams are on each other's level. And particularly with what we saw from Dylan Raiola, like I understand that Nebraska wasn't playing anyone, but at the same time, like the throws he was making, same kind of the same correlation as we said with when we were praising Nico Imaleva, is I don't care who the competition is, the throws are the throws, and he was making them. And that's what Dylan Raiola was doing in that game. So like I think that he has arrived already, and this Nebraska roster is not bad. So but I think what we saw from Colorado against a good North Dakota State team, even if they are an FCS program, I do think that Shedeur looked better than he did last year. The offensive line isn't good, but it is improved, which they were just a sieve last year, so they're not a sieve, so that's good to see. The talent on the outside with Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn Jr., those are two legit NFL guys who are going to be playing in the league next year. So like I do think, the defense, I think Dylan Raiola might have some good numbers against the Colorado defense because I don't think that's fixed at all. Stop playing Shiloh Sanders, you Nepo baby. My God. But anyway, I just think like you're right. These two teams are extraordinary, but it is a game I'm excited to see because they are both extraordinary, which means we should see a good competitive football game.
nepotism will always prevail over cool nepotism. When we see cool nepotism, we talk about it. When it's not, cool nepotism is Shedeur, Shiloh not so much. But I guess two thoughts here before we wrap up the show here. I think the winner of this game has a really good chance of going 8-4, cracking the top 25. Like this is going to
Yeah.
be huge rivalry game from back in the Big Eight days. Or yeah, is that Big Eight for sure. That Big Eight, Big
Mhm.
12. So that would be huge. And there's a reason we didn't go to this game with Antonio because he doesn't know the difference between Jimmy Horn Jr. and Jim Mora Jr.
That's all right. And he was very excited and we tried to explain it. I'm not sure it took, but there's a chance he just absolutely just bails on Auburn, Alabama and heads to this game.
I know there's a lot of people who bail. There a lot of people bail on the Sunnyvale Trailer Park, and this was episode 106 of Fall Start. Yes, that is a phrase.
Dude, unbelievable. 106 episodes into this thing. Not
Uh,
including the recaps, not including the interviews. Like we are thriving out here.
we are doing great. You guys have been fantastic. Going to YouTube has been such a fantastic development in this absolutely dumb college football show. Keep subscribing, keep hitting that like button. You can follow me, John Bueller, on Twitter at Bueller118. You can follow Cody Williams at the Sizzle20. Follow the show at CFB Fall Start. Like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. We need some 5-star reviews on Apple. We would love that so much.
Yeah, very appreciated. The audio matters too. Much like running backs in the NFL, they still matter. They're people. And the 5-star reviews, they're people, and we love them and we need them.
You can watch us on YouTube while you poop, but you can't watch us while you drive. So just listen to us in the podcast.
That's right, please.
God save the King of New Orleans. And this is False Start.